Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. We're really excited to have Cameron Taylor Brown with us to talk about her current body of work and the current exhibition that is at Studio 203. It will be on view until tomorrow, so email us if you haven't come in person and you want to. It's also on our website, which we can put in the chat at the end. So just a couple of reminders, please keep yourself muted. And then also hold your questions until the end. We will have a Q&A with Cameron, which is very exciting. And then if you do have a question, please use the chat box and then I'll read it aloud and then she'll be able to answer them. And first I want to introduce us, Studio 203, and give a little bit of our background, some of our partners, then I'll go into introducing Cameron for you. So Studio 203 is an artist-run space, and we collaborate with fellow artists who want to do exhibitions, who want to do workshops, performances, events, kind of like this. And it is founded by me and my husband, Grant Zizzo, who is managing the stream, so thank you, Grant. And a couple of our partners include Fanny Sinclair's Booty Etiquette and Charm School, which is a series of burlesque dance classes, workshops, intensives, and performances in Los Angeles geared toward building confidence and self-love. Another partner is Lost Hat Media, which is a photography and videography company based in LA. And last but not least is Textile Arts Los Angeles, which is a professional membership organization that encourages dialogue, shares resources, and builds community in order to elevate the practice of textile arts. And as most of you know, this event is part of Textile Month LA, which is the entire month of September that Textile Arts LA has organized. It's the second annual event that they've done, which is really exciting. And their summit, I'll give a little shout out, their summit is next weekend, so if you aren't signed up, please go to their website, which I can also throw in the chat after this, and sign up if you haven't. So now I'm going to introduce Cameron and do a little bit of a bio on her and then introduce the exhibition as well. So a little bit about Cameron. She was introduced to textiles by artist Ed Rosbach at the University of California, Berkeley, and studied textile design at the Philadelphia College of Textiles and Science. Since 1985, Taylor Brown has lived in Los Angeles, where she maintains a studio and is active in arts and education. In 2010, she founded Arts Garage, a textile resource center in Los Angeles, where she teaches Art of the Loom, foundation workshops in weaving, and hosts Create It at Arts Garage for educators. In 2019, she curated the critically acclaimed exhibition Material Meaning, A Living Legacy of Annie Albers at the Craft in America Center in Los Angeles. Her work is widely exhibited and featured in publications including American Craft Magazine, Fiber Art Now, Handwoven, and Shuttle, Spindle, and Die Pot. So a little bit about the current exhibition and her body of work. The exhibition is called Woven Reflections, which explores the interplay of real and reflected, positive and negative, warp and weft. Photographs by the artist of landscapes, Giverny, Brothers Islands, and cityscapes, Manhattan Bridge, are printed onto cloth, deconstructed and woven into textiles, which are then layered and stitched into abstracted images that echo their origins. These mysterious images invite the viewer to ask what might be there, and then again, what might not. And again, this is an event that is part of Textile Arts L.A. Textile Month, and we will be having this exhibition in our physical studio space until tomorrow, and we are open by appointment. So we're going to move into talking about the pieces specifically, kind of about the inspiration, the imagery, the processes, right, all the good juicy stuff. And now I think I'm going to kick it to Cameron, if you want to get us started on this exciting body of work that you have.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. So first of all, I would like to thank Grant and Aneesa for making this happen. It's a lot of work to make a virtual event happen, and it's an entirely different thing than people arriving and me be in a gallery and talking. So I want to acknowledge the amount of effort that goes in behind the scenes, and thank you both. And then I also want to acknowledge Cecily Brown, who did all the beautiful photography, because once again, you're going to be seeing all of these images, and we worked together to make sure that the images were what I wanted them to look like. And she's an amazing photographer and put a lot of extra effort into doing this. So I want to acknowledge her as well. So anyway, so with that, let's start with, we're going to do it in sort of chronological order because it makes sense that way. So we're going to start with the two of Giverny pieces. So if Grant, if you could, what do I say? Cue that up. Is that what I say?
Yes, cue up the Giverny.
There you go. Okay, so my Giverny pieces are really the beginning of this series, and all of these pieces were a result of traveling somewhere and looking around and taking a picture. So I was at Giverny with my daughter and husband, I want to say more than 10 years ago. And we're wandering around, and it's an early spring day, and it's sort of cold, and everything is crisp and beautiful and spring green, and there's hardly any people. And I'm poking around, and my daughter looks at me and looks in the pond and says, "Mom, Monet is all about the reflections. Look at the reflections." And yeah, and I was like, oh, of course. So
Right.
once I started looking at the reflections and then the line between the positive images and what was reflected in the water, it was a completely different experience. It was just magical. And I was like, of course. And so what that reminded me of is that you can be walking through a space and you think you see it, but you might be looking at it not in the way that makes you see it in the most profound way. So it reminded me that seeing is not looking and looking is not seeing. And it also reminded me that people can look at the same thing and see something very different. So I took these photographs, and then they just sat on my computer for a fairly long time, and I didn't really do very much with them until in 2017-18, I started thinking about creating this series where I would try and integrate the photographic images with my weaving and make them one thing where both the weaving and the photography talk to each other. So if you would go to the detail, we'll move on. So this is a detail of Giverny, and you can see right down the middle is that split between the positive imagery and the reflection in the water.
Yeah.
And I actually am cutting up the photographic image. I printed onto cloth, and then I use it as a weft. So I'm actually weaving it in, and then I do some more things which I'll talk about later when we talk more about process. But I was really wanting it to be this mysterious, kind of amorphous, shadowy image where you sort of could pick it out, but it wasn't just a direct photograph. And then you can see I pick up a lot of the lines in the weaving as well. So I think there's a second image, maybe detail, where you can see. Okay, so you can begin to see where there's the opaque image, and then I've taken the same imagery and printed it onto organza, which is a semi-transparent fabric, and so you're seeing through that transparency to the weaving, and then in the bottom you just see the weaving. And so there's this, I think, really beautiful and subtle interplay between the imagery and the weaving, and which was and is very important to me. So that's this first piece.
Yeah,
and so
I love that. I think I'm really interested in the fact that you did weave these backgrounds and then did interact or use the imagery to interact with the weaving, right? And you can kind of see you have like the colors of the yarn drawn from the photographed fabric, but also like complementing it. So do you mind talking about like how you kind of decided on the color scheme and like the lines, right? The repeated lines.
In this particular piece, or just
yeah, in this one, I guess we can move on to the next one
yeah.
because
Let's move on to the next one, because
yeah.
I'll talk. Let's move on to the next one so people don't get bored looking at the same thing.
Yes, there are 5 pieces. We want to see all
That's
of
right.
them.
That's right. So
Yeah.
let's move on to the second one. Yeah, and I can talk about that.
Yeah, yeah, because
Okay,
they all have this like similar line, the lines right on the top and the bottom as the background. But
they do. Okay, so I'm playing a lot with that line of demarcation, that line that if you're looking at a reflection, the line that is the image and the line that's the reflected image. And then also I spend a lot of time at the ocean, and I love that line that is where you see the water meet the sky. And sometimes it's really definite, and sometimes you can't tell if it's a gray day, you can't tell where the ocean ends and the sky begins.
oh yeah.
So I'm playing with that too. So what I always do is I have a fairly neutral warp. These warps are all kind of medium value gray because I want to be able to add color to them, but there's this kind of smokiness that the gray kind of inhabits nicely.
Yeah.
So but the yarn choices in the weft do very much come out of the textures that I see in the images and the colors.
Yeah.
And I think what I love, the stuff of weaving. I love yarn. I was like, I stumbled into a yarn store in college and just went, what is this? This is just amazing. And so, right. And so, I mean, those of us on this call who are weavers or knitters know exactly what I mean. So, it's really fun for me to pick out not only the colors, but complementary textures, and then figure out a way to create some movement in the background. So it's not just neutral, so that there's something really interesting to look at in the background also. Let's continue. Yeah. So.
Yeah, let's continue for sure. And you can definitely see that in these 2 pieces as well, right?
Right.
It's like a little darker medium tone, but it's still like making that like nice neutral background. Anyway,
right.
Continue.
So the next 2 pieces are also related. They're both called. They're both from Brothers Island, Alaska, and I want to say maybe 2 or 3 years ago, my husband and I were on this tiny little boat with that had like 13 guests on it. It was a 1927 boat that used to be a research vessel for the University of Washington, and it was such a small. And we were on the boat for maybe 5 days, and it was such a small boat that often it was just us and the ocean and the sky. It was just beautiful.
That's awesome.
And we saw all sorts of animals, and it was just an amazing trip. And we went kayaking and we went hiking, and it was just incredible. So this particular image started off as an image of a sunset, like the twilight that goes on until 11 o'clock at night in Alaska. And so we're sitting, in this beautiful little bay, and there's one other boat, and you can see it and it's just all these wonderful inky, not quite blue, not quite gray colors, and then the reflection on the water of the sun that hasn't gone down. And it was just so beautiful and so serene, and I felt very happy that I caught this image, because sometimes you think you take a great picture and then you look at it and go, nah, didn't work. But this one really worked, and it was fun to play with. So the first one was one view of Brothers Island, and then if you go to the next one, you'll see that I don't know if you'll see it, but it's a slightly different version of the same picture, where I've changed where the line between the water and the mountain shifts.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's really nice.
yeah. So, and then once again, you can see I pulled out some grays, some blues, some indigo kind of colors that are featured in the photography.
Yeah. Oh, I guess I have another question. So for the warp,
Sure.
did you use the same warp color for all of these pieces, or like just the same for the Brothers Island pieces and the same for the Giverny?
Giverny was different.
Okay.
Quite honestly, what happened is I had some wonderful gray linen for the Giverny, and then I ran out and couldn't get any more.
It happens. Okay.
So yeah,
Okay.
so I scrambled around and I found a beautiful source of linen. I'm going to do a shout out for Gist Yarn and Fiber. They have a beautiful, beautiful linen, which this is. It's a little bit finer than the Giverny linen, but it works really nicely and has a great color palette. So I was able to, I didn't have to mourn the loss of the old one too much, because I was able to find a replacement linen that's quite beautiful, and I'm really happy with it.
Yeah.
These two, the Alaska pieces and the Manhattan Bridge, are all on the same warp.
Okay. I mean, you can't tell, even with them all in the same space, right? They all like make sense together, right? So.
Right. Yeah. And I try, because it's a series, I'll have the sizes be somewhat similar and the finishing techniques be somewhat similar, so that they would read as a collection.
Totally, yeah. And it
although the
definitely
imagery
does.
is different. Yeah. And I don't like to repeat anything. I get bored. So they're all really good. So anyway, so this piece, you can see, this is a detail of the second piece. You can see that I have the opaque fabric in the upper portion, and then I'm sort of overlapping it with the transparent image on the lower portion, so you can see through to the weaving on the bottom, but not on the top.
Sorry to interrupt, but
No, that's fine.
Robin Spady is asking, what is the size of these pieces?
These pieces are about 24 or 5 wide by maybe 30 high.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Let's go to the Manhattan one now.
Okay, all right. So this is the last one, and then I ran out of time and ran out of warp, because that's what happens.
Yes.
So I'm sure there will be another Manhattan Bridge, but so this is the piece that I was in the middle of working on, and then COVID hit, and I couldn't finish it, because I use a really nice fusible webbing from a local fabric store, and it's unbranded, and they cut it off for me, and I don't know what it's called. And so I ran out. And so this sat for a while, and I made a throw for my daughter's couch instead. And then fortunately, COVID lifted, and I ran to the store before Mayor Garcetti changed his mind, and masked up and went in and bought like 5 yards of it, so that will have it now for the next 10 years. So anyway.
Good. Yes. Good.
Right. So this piece, and I'm hoping that the helicopter in the background isn't too loud. So we do live in the middle of downtown, in a metropolitan area, and the police helicopters love to fly overhead. So anyway,
yes.
So this piece is a little bit different than the other two, because this is when I was visiting our son, who lives in Brooklyn, and we were walking along the river near his house in August, and the entire sky was very gray because we were about to get hit with one of those wonderful summer thunderstorms and rainstorms. And so it was like the air just felt thick, and the light reflection was really interesting. And I looked up and saw this beautiful bridge reflected on a glass building, and just took a bunch of pictures. And then once again, went home and had no idea if I was going to do something with it or not. And so what I did with this piece, once again, was pick out the colors, and you can see that the bottom of the bridge is this really deep kind of charcoaly gray. So I echoed that at the bottom. So with this piece, I anchored the bottom in that color, and then sort of bled through all the other colors, and created, this piece has a little more movement to me.
Yeah,
it sort
definitely.
of works its way across. The idea that it's a bridge and that there's movement makes sense to me. There's a little more action, and it's also Manhattan. It's not serene like
Right.
Alaska.
Or
So
or even the Giverny, right? The
right,
landscapes.
yeah. So there's still a certain amount of calmness and serenity in this, and quiet beauty, because I like creating all of that. But there's a little more action, so you kind of know it's Manhattan. So let's go to a couple of. Okay, so you can see here the bridge imagery is kind of placed in, it's woven, and then it's kind of trapped. You can see that I'm taking some of the lines that are in the bridge and kind of overlapping them and creating a little more movement.
Yeah.
And just kind of abstracting it, but it's still woven in as weft. So.
Yeah. I think it's, can we go back, sorry, really quick. I think it's interesting that reflection is kind of dealt with in a different way with this piece, right? Because a lot of the other pieces were like reflection of water, or like an object in the water, right? And this one doesn't necessarily have like that body of water next to it, but it's still, right? It's still the repeated imagery and like the opaque versus the less opaque fabric. And this is definitely my favorite one.
Yeah, I know. You told me. Yeah. So what's interesting to me is there's a body of water in all three of these images. It's just the water in this piece is underneath the bridge. It's not, and so so I saw a bit of reflection in the water, but to me the reflection against the glass of the, or metal, whatever it is, the reflection is on the office building in this, not on the water. So there is definitely a reflection, but it's not as obvious, and it's a reflection off of something else. Which, now that I think about it, why wouldn't the reflection be off a building in Manhattan and water?
I love it. Yeah.
In Alaska, right? So
yes.
Yeah, so that just kind of happened. But
for sure, yeah. So I'm hoping we can go into discussing the process a little more granularly.
Of course. Yes, of course.
So if we could pull up those process photos, that'd be great.
Okay, so this is where I start. I start with an image that appeals to me, and I print it onto opaque fabric. It's a cotton fabric, and then I also print it onto translucent organza fabric, and it's the same size, because then that allows me to like layer and play around with the imagery a little bit. So this is the starting point, and I've already printed it onto cloth here. And let's go to the next. And then I start playing with sort of what kind of repeat do I want to happen. So with this particular piece, I really wanted the line of the bridge to continue. And so all across the piece, I lined up the image, the printed image, so that I could get a continuous line of the bridge, because that was important to me. So I'm playing with it there. So that's the second thing I do.
Yeah.
And then I put the printed fabric onto the loom and play around with where I want it to be in the weaving, and I select all my weft colors, which I have pulled out here. And so you'll see there's some wonderful paper tape, there's a little bit of metallic gimp, and then there's 2 or 3 different linen colors as well. So that becomes what my palette is as I start to weave. And then if we'll go to the next one. So you can see here that I've woven, I've done some weaving, and I'm beginning to place, decide where the printed fabric actually goes.
Yeah.
And I do little stair steps once I decide. So image number 1 pops in. I'm like pointing at it and you can't see me. Image number 1 pops into that little pocket. You know, image number 2 comes in on top of it.
Oh, yeah.
And right, and then I cut the fabric up and make it weft. So what's happening here is I step on the treadle, which lifts up all the warp threads, which are the vertical direction warp threads for the non-weavers out there. And then I put a pickup stick in and pull it across and only hold out a few of the threads and let the rest fall. And then I insert the cut up fabric and treat it as a really wide weft. But I don't want all of the warp threads to be up because I want the image to be clearly seen, but I want enough of the warp threads to be up so that it's really obvious that it's weaving. And I also like that that vertical element of the threads kind of adding to the imagery.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so does that sort of make sense as I explain it?
Let's see if there's any questions.
Yeah.
So far, so good. A lot of people are wanting to know how you print the fabric.
Okay. We can talk about that. Yeah, I can talk about that.
Okay, we can get to that.
So we can get to that. Yeah. So it's sort of like switching from the concept to the what's the name of the fabric is a little bit of a brain tease for me. So let's just stick with the conceptual stuff
That's
for
fair.
a little while.
Yeah.
Okay.
So far, so good.
So, yeah. Okay. So now you can see that I have like the opaque images. There's 2 of them, and then I start playing around with where do I want this sort of color trap or image trap of this translucent piece. Where do I want to lay it? And I'm just playing with it, but I don't add it until after it's off the loom, because that part is not woven in, it's added later. But I still want to see it because I want to have a sense of where I'm headed with the background.
Right.
So I'm kind of going back and forth between the weaving of the opaque cotton fabric with the image, and then what happens when I lay in this other element, which comes later. And then I pull it off and keep weaving. Okay, can we go to the next one?
Oh,
and you can see here you can see that I've taken this image, this opaque image, printed image, and I've cut it into 3 wefts. 1, 2, 3. Do you see how there's cuts?
Yeah.
And I've woven number 1, and I always cut in line with the image. I don't go all the way across. I don't strip weave like it's a rag rug. I follow the line of the imagery.
Right. Yeah, I think that's really strong, especially in this piece, right, with all the cabling. Someone had mentioned.
Right.
Let me see their comment really quick. Yeah, I'll find it in a minute, but just the cabling and the tension of the warp yarn, right? Drawing the eye up, but also like drawing it across the image is really nice.
Right, right. Yeah. I mean, and so here you can see that it's now off the loom, which you can't tell from here, but it's now off the loom and on a table.
Yes.
Trust me, that's what's going on here. And then I have pins, and I'm taking that semi-transparent overlay and cutting it up and deciding where it goes and pinning it into place. And I will sometimes, have it out on the table and not make my mind up right away, because once I glue it down with the fusible webbing, it's kind of done.
Right.
So I like to leave it out and decide and fool around with it. And I might even like fool around with it and take some pictures of it, rearrange it, take another picture of it, and then put it away, and then later look at the pictures and say, oh, I like what this is doing versus this one. So I document my options, because otherwise I don't remember what I did.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And then I go back in and I use this fusible webbing, and I put it underneath I cut it so that it goes underneath the organza. And then I put a little press cloth, because I certainly don't want to scorch it at this late date. I put a little press cloth on, and then just iron it on, and that's the surface. So I do that all over the piece.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I actually add stitching, and I quilt it, that section. I put a little bit of, in the Giverny pieces, I didn't do this, and I wanted the stitching to have a little bit more robust quality, a little more dimensionality. So I saw that, I sort of looked up different ways to do that, and I saw that you could do that with a thin piece of felt. I didn't want to use batting, because I didn't want to turn it into a quilt.
Right.
So I put a really thin piece of felt behind it, and then I'm stitching through that. And so the stitching I use to add a little bit of detail, and also to follow some of the lines, and to just increase the dimensionality a bit. But once again, just like with the cutting, I'm not adding extra motifs. I'm pulling out and emphasizing things in the imagery that I want to emphasize.
Yeah, I love that.
And so this also, it might sit out for 2 or 3 days, where I'll go, oh, I'm going to add like 2 or 3 here, and then I wait. And then I go, oh, I'm going to add something here. So it evolves over time. I don't just sit and plow through it, because it really takes me a while to kind of decide where I want to take it. And at this point, I have many hours into it. So to rush through this and stitch something that I don't like would make me very sad. So I just, so I do it in a very deliberate way. So, and then when it's off, I think this is the last process.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So what I do once and I forgot to take pictures of this, sorry everybody, but I take it off, and then I finish the top and the bottom, and we can go back to a finished piece to talk about that if you want to. I do the top and the bottom, and then I actually put a separate piece of, okay, so you can see that I do twisted fringe on the bottom. And then I put a little stick at the top that's painted the same color.
Yes.
And tie it off, put the stick in, tie it off. And then the lovely thing about linen is that it sticks up like a crazy haircut.
Yes.
So,
yes, it does.
So what I love about this linen is that it's this order and disorder kind of thing, because the bottom is all orderly and the top is just crazy thread.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing that I really enjoy about weaving. And I like the warp threads to show. I try, and when I can, I try and do pieces where I show where it started,
Right.
because I don't want it to look like a photograph or a painting. I want it to look like a weaving.
I love that. Yeah, and
So,
it adds this extra element, right? Like it's very obvious that it is a weaving, which I love, right?
mhm.
I think it's really beautiful. Um, do we want to go into questions, or do
Well,
you
I
have a
know
couple more
that's fine.
points?
So somebody, I think that's pretty much. Did you have a couple of more questions, Anissa?
Did
Because I know
I?
you had. Yeah, yeah. I'm sort of
I think we covered a lot of it. I think
okay.
so. I had the great fortune of living with these pieces for the past couple of weeks, which has been really great. Um, and I I love how peaceful. If you've come in person, then you know this, right? You come into the space. Oh yeah, thank you, Grant. And there is symmetry, right, within the installation itself. Trying to like mimic that line of reflection again. Um, and seeing them all in this space, right, I started to notice the framing of them. So I know we talked a little bit about the background and how you chose the weaving or the colors and the yarn and that type of a thing, but also I think it's interesting how you showed so much of the weaving and how there is this like really nice thick border on either side of the images.
Hmm.
I kind of want you to talk a little more about the decision to make those borders so apparent and not just have the background be this subtle, beautiful weaving that you just see through
Hmm.
like the silk organza.
Okay. Um, I think if I don't know how many people saw the Fiber Trails show
Mm,
that Anissa, that you installed when
yeah.
you were at the Branch Gallery. But if you followed my work for a while, you'll know that I weave, and I also do surface design. But my past work was either mainly weaving with a little bit of surface design, or surface design with a little bit of weaving. And I really wanted to honor the importance of weaving and have it be a conversation between the weaving and the surface design, and have them be of equal importance. So that's why, because my deepest self is a weaver, and I felt like I wasn't getting enough of that into the work where I was manipulating images. So it was a
Right.
conscious decision.
Yeah, I think that's really great. And you can see, right, if you did see the Fiber Trails exhibition, um, oh, sorry. So, okay,
And I
sorry.
will say, if you didn't see the Fiber Trails exhibition, a lot of that work is on my website, so you
Yes,
can go back and see. So
right.
I feel like this series is a culmination
Yeah.
of sort of a process that I went through, where gradually I think this, it's kind of unconscious. It's like,
Yeah.
I love weaving, but I had all these wonderful photographs, and I wanted to figure out a way to incorporate these photographs into my textile work.
Yeah.
So it became surface design mostly, with maybe and some stitching and a little bit of weaving. And then I started to say, I miss weaving, you know?
Yes. Yeah. No,
So what can I
exactly.
do to sort of back off a bit from the surface design part, or not necessarily back off, but have them be of equal importance?
Yeah.
And
I think that's
because I
very
don't
evident.
want to, yeah, I
Sorry, go
don't
ahead.
want to abandon the weaving. I feel like there there is a tendency in the sort of art and design world to look down on weaving as a craft. And
Right.
so there's this, and that's changing, but that's still sort of there. And
Right.
so I wanted to say, darn it, I am a weaver.
Yeah.
And this work is beautiful and it deserves to be shown in a gallery, and it is art,
Yes.
and
Definitely.
deal with it.
And deal with it. Exactly. And that's how we have Woven Reflections, everyone.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So I think that's.
I'm gonna leave for a second and
Okay.
grab the if I can find it, what I print on, so people can actually see what it is. So
Perfect.
hold on.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to line up some questions really quick. All right. Yeah. So we're going to open up for questions. So if you want to go over to the chat and type in your questions, I will read them, and Cameron will probably answer them.
All right. Amazingly enough, I actually
there you go.
Woo! Okay.
Ooh, that's cool. Okay, that answers a lot of people's questions. Number one question has been, do you silk screen your images? What do you use to print? What's the opaque fabric? And it looks like it's that good stuff.
So I get it from jacquardproducts.com or from Blick.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there's 3 different fabrics. One is opaque cotton, one is opaque silk, and I decided that I liked what the image looked like on the cotton better, so I used the opaque cotton as the ground, and then I used something called organza, which is the same company. It's just silk organza, is what I print on, and I put it. I think you can see my printer over here. I put it on my printer.
That one, yes.
That one right there. And the kind of ink that I have is supposed to be archival. I did some research on it, and it's supposed to be, as long as I don't, get the off-brand stuff, it's supposed to be, reasonably stable. And, I'm certainly not going to immerse it in a swimming pool, and I'm not going to have it be in really direct sunlight, but I wouldn't do that with any textile.
No, exactly.
So,
exactly.
With reasonable caution, I anticipate that that people who need to preserve textiles in the future won't.
They won't tear their hair out. Yeah.
They won't tear their hair out.
The fowler won't be angry. Yeah.
Conservators won't go, what did she do? Oh my God.
Exactly. Okay, so I guess another question along the same line is, what kind of ink are you using? Just regular inkjet, or are you buying like a similar Jacquard brand kind of thing? Like
No. It's just the ink that comes with that particular brand. It's a Hewlett Packard.
Cool.
So yeah, it's not fancy. And I don't know if Karen Hampton's on this call or not, but Karen Hampton, I think, she does a lot of printing, and it was nice to hear that she came to the same conclusion that this particular brand of ink, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn, I'm pretty sure it was this brand, but basically there are brands of ink out there that are better than others that you can print onto fabric, and you can trust that they're not going to fade and
get weird.
So,
okay, cool.
Get weird, yeah.
Awesome.
Well, all textiles fade and get weird if they're in direct sunlight.
Right.
I mean,
right.
That is the sad fact of So
that's
I don't put them in direct sunlight. Yeah.
Good.
Okay.
We shouldn't. So someone wants to know how many harnesses you have on your loom that you use to create these images. So how many harnesses do you use at a time?
I have 16 shafts on my loom, but I could make these pieces with 2 because it's plain weave. But I generally do it on 4 shafts because when I'm lifting that second set of threads, I only want to lift the equivalent of every other plain weave. When I'm lifting and putting the stick in, I'm lifting, instead of lifting 2 and 4 and 1 and 3, I might just be
Right.
lifting 1 all the way across and
For
then 3
sure.
all the way across.
That's really smart. Yeah.
So,
Good
yeah.
question. Okay, so Kitty asks, are there any practices you've implemented into your daily life to maintain creativity slash inspiration? How do you overcome creative blocks?
I love, and I'm looking at it right here, there's a wonderful Chuck Close quote. I'm going to pull it
Oh,
off
I love him.
of
Yes.
the studio, and I'm
Yes.
going to pull it off. And all right. I try and it's actually easier with COVID because I'm not teaching very much and we're not traveling,
Right.
is I show up to the studio fairly regularly for whatever it is that I'm doing. And I might not be weaving every day, but I do things in my studio space, and it's often creative, and sometimes it might be answering emails, but at least I'm looking at gorgeous yarn, and I'm not looking at
Yes.
and I'm not looking at the laundry.
Yes.
So
Yes.
right, so I'm
Good.
here, and it's what I do. So Chuck Close's quote is, "Inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us just show up and get to work, and the belief that things will grow out of the activity itself, and then you will through work bump into other possibilities and kick open other doors that you would never dream up if you were just sitting around looking for a great art idea."
Dang,
And
that's
it
good.
goes on from there. So I have learned to just block out time and show up
Yeah. I think that's great
and
advice.
and start,
Yeah.
right? And sometimes it goes nowhere, but sometimes it goes somewhere,
Yeah, for sure.
right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I
Right.
totally agree, 100%. Okay, so another question is, oh, Nancy Nelson says she's always loved that quote, so got a
Oh, all
winner.
right. Thank you, Nancy.
Yeah, so Beth Hagenlocker says it looked like there was also a transfer of the image on the warp in the Manhattan Bridge process photos. Did you do
I did
that?
not, but it might have looked that way because you were probably looking through that translucent organza. So it looked like there had been an image transfer onto the warp.
Right.
Because once it's finished, it's very clear in this particular picture
Right.
that it's the organza. But once it's all down and stitched on and manipulated and kind of deconstructed, it's much less obvious where the weaving ends and the surface design begins. It's
Right.
much more integrated.
Yeah, I
And I
love
think you
that.
can see that in here. Yeah,
For
yeah.
sure, yeah. I think it is the most evident in this piece and also the Giverny.
Yes.
Yeah, which is really lovely. Does anyone else have any questions? Please use the chat if you can. I think we hit all of my questions, right? Do you have anything else you want to add, Cameron?
Well, I think what I would like to add is I am so happy that 100 people decided to come and spend time on a
Yeah,
Saturday afternoon. So
right.
thank you so much, because there's a lot of things you could be doing, and you made the decision to spend it with us, and I don't take that for granted. So
Yeah, for
thank you.
sure. Yeah, I'm gonna say ditto, right? Thank you all for coming. Okay, so Robin Spady says, I'm curious about what Cameron is wearing.
Oh, of course
Could
you
you
are, because
describe?
Robin's. Okay, I'm gonna shut this window, this door, because there's weird light coming in. So for those of you who don't know Robin, she is an amazing weaver and teaches a lot of interesting pattern stuff. So I'm gonna like do the thing where I show it up to the screen, and so this is a really interesting kind of shrink woven thing
Oh,
with
cool.
differential shrinkage.
Yeah.
And I usually wear it when I teach at weaving conferences because people like Robin come up and go, "What is that?"
I love it.
So, yeah.
That's
So
great.
yeah, it's a tribal sign to, wear
Mm,
interesting structures
love
when you're
it.
talking.
Okay, so we
Right.
have
And then
another question. Leslie Roberts wants to know what's next for you, Cameron.
what's next for me is in a very literal sense, is I'm picking up the work on Monday from Aneesa's studio, and then 3 of the 5 pieces were accepted. We were told we could send 3 options, and the gallery accepted all 3. So I'm driving 3 of the pieces down to a gallery in Carlsbad, which has a show that's opening in October.
Yeah.
So that's what's next. And then in terms of work, I'm probably going to continue with this series because I have some additional photographs of reflections that I haven't gotten to yet, which is good. I have a nice library of reflections that I've collected over the years because I can't go out and get more because we're not traveling.
Love it. Yeah, exactly. You got to make the
Yeah,
work now.
that's right. That's right.
I love
So yeah,
it.
so I'm trying. I think all of us are like trying to figure out how to get through this weird and awful time um, in a way where we come out the other end relatively intact.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to realize that there's a lot that I can't do, but be grateful for what I can do. And what I
Yeah.
can do is spend more time in the studio continuing on this path that I'm on.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah.
Love that. Yeah. Awesome. Any last burning questions? We have a couple of minutes. Marina asks what gallery in Carlsbad? I believe it's Front
It
Porch, right?
is, yeah, it's Front Porch Gallery.
Front
Yeah,
Porch
and actually
Gallery.
Aneesa has some work in that show as well.
I only
Yeah,
have
it's
one
it's a
piece.
yeah, it's the California Fibers show,
Yes.
which actually there's a preview of that show on the Textile Arts Los Angeles events.
Good
So
to know.
yes,
Yes, it is
yes,
Textile
but
Month.
they are actually open. They probably are not going to do a reception because that doesn't seem wise, but they are going to do in-person viewing. And I think it's not by appointment, but it's one of these things where if there's too many people in the gallery, you have to wait. But I don't sense by appointment because it's a little bit bigger space than your space,
Right.
Aneesa.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, that's
And
great.
then, and then it's part of the whole Front Porch retirement community. So we're doing a number of lectures and Zoom workshops, but it's for the Front Porch retirement community, not for the general public. So I'm going to be doing a kitchen table show and tell, which will be
Ooh,
fun, and then I'm doing a lecture. So
that's awesome.
yeah, yeah. So
Very cool. Yeah. Well, I
all right.
think we're going to wrap it up for today. I want to say thank you again to Cameron for joining us and talking a little bit about your work. I love this series. I'm really excited to see what happens next. And thank you all for coming and joining us. And I guess we'll see you next time, right? I'm going to post in the chat a couple of websites, and then we're going to sign off. So.
But I think, Aneesa, that you should use this opportunity to talk about your show, which is coming up next.
My
And that's it. Yeah.
Okay,
Let's just get it all in here.
I'll plug a little
Let's do it.
bit. Okay, okay.
All right.
So once Cameron's work is on its way to Carlsbad, right, the space is going to be cleared. And my friend, who's also in Textile Arts L.A., Monica Lloyd, my friend and I are going to do a collaborative exhibition. So we decided to trade sketchbooks back and forth right around March when the pandemic really heated up, just as a way to stay creative, get our hands going still, right? Even though everything was uncertain and really scary. And so we played around with these sketchbooks. We came up with a new idea on, oh, let's make work that is influenced by the sketchbooks, and make this whole exhibition kind of surrounding the idea of the sketchbooks that we did work on. So that's coming up. It will be opening, the soft opening, right, probably online for most of it, and then by appointment again. We'll be opening not next Monday, the following Monday on the 28th of September. So the Monday after the Textile Summit, for those of you who will be attending, and we're very excited. So yeah, stay tuned, sign up for the newsletter, and then you can get information about that, more specific details. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's a really wonderful space, and I think it's just so terrific that that you and Grant are doing this for the community of artists, and sponsoring these shows, and it's a lovely space. And I will also say there is decent parking.
Yes, there is.
So it's easy. So I want to do a shout out for that, because there's
Yes.
parking on site. So.
Right. Parking on site. There's free street parking. Have you heard of that before? Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to say.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
A final, thank you. We'll see you next time.
And I'm supposed to remind you, Aneesa, to save the chat because I don't have the buttons.
All right. I got this.
Okay.
I'm going to
All
save
right.
it.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
All right.
Thank you,
Bye.
everybody. Enjoy the rest of your evening.